Before I start talking about this subject of leadership, perhaps I should just say a word about my experience, which is from 33 years in our British Royal Navy, at sea a lot of the time, also at the strategic level in our Ministry of Defence, and a certain amount of commercial leadership experience too. These days I have a portfolio type of existence, so I have a number of roles, some of which are charitable. I'm the deputy chairman of a particular charity in the United Kingdom. And for 4 years I was the commandant of the Royal College of Defence Studies in London, which brings together people from all over the world at medium rank level to learn about leadership in the international environment. And I'm very pleased to say I've just heard that an Armenian for the first time will be going to that college later this year. Everybody knows that these are interesting, fast-changing, difficult times, and a great deal of uncertainty around. After World War II, there was, of course, a certain stability. After those terrible wars, people wanted stability. There was a Western construct. We had the United Nations and the Bretton Woods organizations. But now all of that is starting to be challenged a little bit, and there's a shift of focus towards the East. And so there's uncertainty. I'm not saying any of that is wrong, but there's uncertainty where, until quite recently, there was not uncertainty. And that creates some challenges for leadership. From a military point of view, one might say that the borderline between peace and war is no longer really there. There is conflict everywhere of various kinds, and so this too makes it a challenging environment. I would mention very briefly the cyber threat. It's advancing upon us every day, this threat. With our mobile phones, every one of us now is easily at risk of having our identity stolen, the money taken from our bank accounts and all that. And this cyber threat has hardly even started. So there's another one. And I just wanted to very briefly mention these points in order to say one particular dimension, which I think is an important characteristic in being able to navigate through these modern difficult waters. It's not a new characteristic, it's very obvious. It comes from Darwin, who all those years ago was the first to write about how species remain successful, animals and plants and such like. And he did not say that it was the fastest or the fiercest or the biggest animal that would survive. He said that it was the most adaptable ones who would survive. And to me nowadays, in every aspect of what we do internationally and so on, adaptability is a fundamental requirement. And I must say, from what I know of the history of your people, the Armenian people and the Armenian nation, a characteristic that is common here in a very significant way. It's adaptability that we're going to have and develop and must be a part of leadership. Easy to say, not always easy to have. Something very briefly about what leadership is not, in the way that I want to talk about it anyway. It is not about organizations or diagrams or management theories. What it is a human thing. It's about a deal, a contract, an understanding, a compact between people. And the people that it is between are the leader, him or herself, and the people who are led. If you have real leadership, the people who are led do what the leader wants because they trust him or her, they understand what he or she is about, they do what they're told because they believe in their leader. Now, in the military sphere, this can be absolutely a matter of life and death. In a ship, my life's work, the crew absolutely depend on the captain to be good at his job. So trust and understanding the importance of the crew having a stake in the plan, in what is being done by the leader, is absolutely essential. It's true that in certain circumstances one can get things done by other methods. One can cause things to happen by fear, by bullying, by threats, for example, for a period. But this is obviously not the long-term effective way of building teamwork, team spirit, and delivering results. And this is what I mean by the importance of the teamwork, the trust and the understanding between the leader and the led. You can't have endless conversation about everything. So, for example, in my life, on the bridge of a ship, if we're in the middle of fog and suddenly a ship comes out of the fog and you have to make a dramatic alteration of course or speed to get out of its way, and you give an order, it's no use the man on the wheel saying, well, I'd like to have a conversation about that for half an hour. Clearly there are moments for obedience to orders and instant action. But even so, it's very important to think of leadership as a human relationship between the leader and the led. I want to mention a handful of principles, and the first is about integrity and trust. I've already mentioned the word trust. I believe in this very strongly, and my experience is that if a leader loses his integrity or compromises it, loses the trust of his team, it's almost impossible ever to get it back completely. And I remember an occasion when we were sailing in the aircraft carrier, of which I was the captain, for the Arabian Sea. I suspected that things were going to happen, things would change on that deployment, and so I promised the ship's company that I would never lie to them. I find that no difficulty at all, but I made that promise. And then I did find out 9/11 happened while we were on that deployment, and our plans did change quite a lot. So I, for a period, knew that's exactly what was going to happen, or a very good idea of it, and it was so discreet, so secret at that time that I couldn't tell the ship's company. So the question was, how should I deal with that? And I dealt with it. There's nothing clever about this, but it's just an example. I dealt with it by getting everybody together, about 1,200 people in the ship, and I said, you may be thinking something's about to happen. I can tell you there is going to be a change of plan. I can't tell you what it is because it's that secret, but I assure you that I will when I can, and you have no reason to be concerned. Now, there's nothing, as I say, clever about that, but it makes the point about the trust and the integrity relationship. The second of these small points is about communication. I have learned rather slowly through my life that communication, human voice, language communication between people is extremely imperfect. I might say to you, this cat down here is black, and you might hear, this dog is red. It's extraordinary the inability of human beings, especially across cultural boundaries, which we often have to do nowadays, to not be clear in what they express through language. This is very important in leadership, because often you get people going off in the wrong direction, not because they're doing the wrong thing, but because they haven't understood. And the way that we in the military tend to deal with that, or I must say I have adopted very much myself, is what we call back briefing. It means that you tell a team what they have to do in a leadership position. Later on, you then get them to tell you back what it is that you have said. And every time you will be amazed to discover how different the two are. Not deliberately, it's just the imperfection of language. And then you go over that 2 or 3 times, and then you get a real team effort because everybody understands what you're really trying to say. The next point is authenticity. You can be a big, robust, loud figure, or you can be soft and quiet. You can make your decisions very quickly, or you can make your decisions in a more considered way, and any number of other differences. And it's all fine. You can be a leader in all these different ways, provided you don't try to pretend to be something that you're not. If you do that, you're always found out. People understand that you're just playing a part, and then they won't trust you. But if you simply behave as you personally are, that goes a long way. The culture in organizations depends on the leader. The leader must make the culture, and it is primarily done by example. There are many measures of good cultures and bad cultures, but one measure of bad cultures is when people within the organization, and it is surprising how common this is, people within organizations do not surface, do not declare bad news. They like to tell good news. They like to please the boss, to please the leader, but they're frightened of talking bad news. It happens in all societies, all organizations, and it simply depends on how the leader behaves. And we've all seen, I expect, in organizations round a board table, for example, a situation where there's something being said which is not accepting bad news, or people are avoiding bad news. And what they do is they're suddenly sitting down like this, and they're making notes, and they're making sure that nobody's meeting their eyes. If you see that around a table, it means the culture is not right. It's a very important point to get it right. That's the way you make things move forward and move along successfully. If the culture is wrong, it's extremely difficult to make things happen. I want to give an example from British naval experience of very bad culture. 1800 to 1850, the Navy was fighting the whole time. It was the time of Admiral Lord Nelson, very well known British Admiral. He was a wonderful leader. He is an example. And it was very flexible. The things I'm talking about were good. Then the Navy was not fighting, and all sorts of bad habits came in. So it became more important that the gun was beautifully polished than it ever went bang. And there came a time about 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, when two columns of ships were proceeding like this through the sea. They were going to turn in towards each other and go back the other way. Very powerful, big figure, strong admiral in command. He was a good man in many ways, but he was not a man that liked to be questioned. And on this occasion, he had made a mistake. Despite being good at this, there wasn't room. And it is known that many people, including quite senior officers on the bridges of the two lead ships, knew this. But no one said, you mustn't do this, this is wrong, there is not room. So the order was given, the lead ships, both battleships, big ships, moved like this slowly through the water and entered the same place, and they collided. One of the ships sank very quickly with the loss of over 800 lives, including the admiral's, which was probably quite a good thing in that circumstance. All because the leader couldn't be questioned. Now, please believe me, the Navy is not like that now. We're back to much more flexible, adaptable, engaging styles of leadership, and people are encouraged to question if they have reason to question, and accepting eventually that there must be a clear line, of course, and that that's the leader's job. But it shows what can happen, and it can still happen today if the culture's wrong. More and more, as I have got older and a bit more experienced, I've realized that instinct matters in leadership. Now, some people can think that instinct is something you either have or you haven't, and to an extent, I think that is true. But it is possible to develop it by at least two methods, and one is to be professional. If you know your job, the job of the business, then you're likely to have good instincts. But the other one is to be observant of people, to develop the habit of noticing how people react to you, what the broader circumstances are. And if you do that, there's a reasonable chance that your instincts will be good. But as people get more senior, it is impossible to have a grasp on all the facts all the time, quite impossible. And so to an extent, instinct has to be part of it, and it's very important indeed. I can think of many times, for example, one occasion in one of the frigates I commanded, where we did in fact very nearly have a collision in very thick fog because the officer of the watch had lost his confidence and was not doing the right thing. An instinct told me to go to the bridge. It was quite extraordinary. 1 minute later, I think it would have been too late. I don't say that's clever. I'm just saying instinct is important.